Good morning. The June 30, 2020 Rule Development Workshop and Board Workshop is now called to order. We are continuing with modifications to our workshop processes to address health and safety concerns as a result of the COVID-19 emergency. Today, board members will assemble in the boardroom with the exception of Ms. McDougall, who will be joining us telephonically. The public may join us via our usual streaming channels. We will invite staff members in one at a time when appropriate. A registration link for public comments regarding the policies under Rule Development was placed on the district website on Friday, June 26, 2020, and left up until Monday, June 29, 2020, at 8 a.m. Anyone who registered for public comments would have been called Monday evening, beginning at 5:30. Pam, roll call, please.
Mrs. Belford?
Present.
Ms. Campbell? Ms. Deskovich? Present. Ms. McDougall?
Present.
And Mr. Susan?
Present.
Thank you. We will now say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and with liberty and justice for all. First on our agenda are the policies under Rule Development, which I will list. 5610, removal, suspension, and expulsion of students. 7110, student accommodation. 7120, criteria for balancing school membership capacity. 9800, charter schools. Board members first discussed these policies during the policies work session held on June 16, 2020. No persons registered to make comments on any of the above mentioned policies. Therefore, unless any board member has anything they wish to add, this will conclude the Rule Development Workshop. Anything to add, any board members? Okay, now let's move on to the board workshop portion on district-wide behavior plan. I will ask for Chris Moore, Assistant Director of Student Services, to come to the podium to provide us the information. Before you start, real quick, Ms. Moore, Mr. Gibbs, we don't need to vote on those policies at this meeting? Are we voting on them later?
No, you don't vote on those at this one. They get
Okay.
voted on at the board meeting.
Okay, just wanted to make sure before we got too far. Thank you so much, Ms. Moore.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm here to talk about the district behavior plan, and I want to give you a little bit of background. So this whole journey started back in 2015. Dr. Desmond Blackburn came and did a listening and learning tour, and part of that tour was hearing about the disparity in how discipline was across the district. And he asked student services as well as some other divisions to get together and to develop a fair and consistent.
I think we're having issues with your mic, Ms. Moore. Give us just one.
Are we good? Can you hear it now? Okay. And we were asked to develop a fair and consistent district-wide discipline plan. And the purpose of that plan was exactly that. If students get in trouble, that there was a narrow menu of options so that all students who did the same infraction would get kind of the same discipline across the district from north to south, from east to west. And so we did that, and it did what it was supposed to do. It made sure there was consistent discipline across the district. But what it didn't do was change behavior. And as Dr. Mullins did his listening and learning tour, he went to schools and listened to parents and students and teachers and administrators, and they all had kind of the same message to him. Although it was different everywhere, the one consistent theme was that student behaviors were out of control. We know based on the information when we looked at the data from the district-wide discipline plan that suspensions are consistent. They haven't gone down. They have actually gone up a little, but it hasn't really impacted student behavior in the classroom. So he called me down to his office and he said, Chris, we need to do something. We need to be responsive to that. I need you and your team and a cross-functional group to get together and figure out how to change the behavior in Brevard County. So we first started looking at data. We got a good team together, and we started looking at data. And this is some information from the 2020 Insight Survey that teachers reported. They were looking at interactions between students and adults. 64% agreed or strongly agreed that they were respectful. They were looking at whether there were consistent expectations across the school, and 55% agreed or strongly agreed. And they looked at whether or not leaders provided them the support they needed to maintain the standards of behavior in their school. And 67% either agreed or highly agreed. Now, we can all look at that and say that should be higher. It's not dismal, but we should have a better result than that from across all of our schools. So then we looked at what students reported. Now this is a little bit misleading, so I want to make sure that we're really clear on what these percentages are. So we took a Youth Truth Survey in 2020, and our elementary were asked, do you experience an orderly, respectful classroom? So that 17% doesn't represent only 17% of them said yes. What Youth Truth does is compare you to other schools similar to yours, and then it kind of ranks you. And that 17% represents that our students said yes more than 17% of all of the other schools, meaning there are 83 schools, 83% of schools whose students said yes more. So I just want to make sure that it's a weird way to look at data, but that's how it's reported. Does that make sense? Okay.
Chris, would you take because it is so counterintuitive
Yeah.
to what data is, and this is important, would you walk through it one more time?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So the way Youth Truth reports their data, it is in comparison to other schools like our schools. So we get a ranking. So we could look at it as, quartiles, first quartile, second, third, fourth. So in the case of the elementary students who said they experienced an orderly, respectful classroom, they all ranked it. They all said they gave it a ranking of 1, 2, or 3. And this is where our ranking fell amongst the cluster of other elementary schools that took that survey. We scored as well or better than 17% of the other schools, which means that 83% of the schools involved, their students felt more that they had an orderly, respectful classroom at their schools.
What I think, correct me if I'm wrong, what I think is important to note is we don't know how much more. It's not disaggregated by that much. It could be slightly, it could be marginally. So we just don't have the disaggregated all the way down. But what we want to be is more than 17.
More than that,
So
right.
continuous improvement.
So again, we looked at some other of the STEMs, secondary, same realm, respectful environment, 20% in middle school, 21% high school. We scored at that range amongst our peer schools. And then we got down to elementary students who said, do I treat my teacher with respect? Do students in this school treat my teachers with respect? We scored better than 35% of the other schools. And when we get down to secondary, it goes a little lower than that at 19% and 21%. I think what's really important with both the Insight data and the Youth Truth data is that it's telling you that while we're a high achieving district, I mean, we're number 1, 2, 3 in the state across many of the tests that we take. Behaviorally, what Dr. Mullins heard on his tour is how we're perceiving ourselves. It's how students perceive it. It's how teachers perceive it. So then we wanted to get out of the realm of perception, and we wanted to look at some of the DOE discipline data. So remember, we put the discipline plan in place, and it was to get consistent, fair discipline. One of the biggest worries was our suspension rate's going to go down. In fact, suspension rate didn't go down. So let's look at some of our state standing discipline data. So all of the data I'm about to present to you right now is straight numbers. None of them are percentages. So this data was from 18-19 because discipline data is lagged. And so we were number 11th in the state in size at that time. So we were at about 73,000 kids at that time. To keep it in perspective, the top 6 districts, the top 3 are over 200,000, 230, 210. And the next grouping is in the 150, 160,000 range. I think the lowest of that large group is, I think it's 120, and we're at 73. So these are straight number statistics. We're number 11, size of district by enrollment in the state. We're number 7 in expelling our students with disabilities. That's what that means, expelling students with continuing services. And again, it's straight number, not percentage, not per capita, it is straight number. We're number 2 in the state for expelling students without continuing services. So these are our gen ed kids. We're number 3 at placing students in alternative learning centers. So I think it's important that we see that because some people might look at this and say, well, you know, it's because other places just put all their kids in alternative learning centers and they don't actually expel them, and we do. In fact, we're number 3 in the realm of putting kids in ALCs as well. We're number 6 for out-of-school suspensions. And I think what's really important about that number 6 is it kind of gives you the indication that we're not really suspending our way to good behavior. Discipline is not the research-backed way to change students' behavior. And in fact, what we can tell you about the research on suspension is that it actually lowers achievement, it lowers graduation rate, it lowers, needless to say, it lowers attendance, but nowhere does it impact behavior. And this last one, I think, was kind of hurtful to all of us. We're number 2 in the state for suspending kindergarten students. And so all of that data combined showed us that our discipline plan did what it was supposed to do. We were asked to develop a plan for consistent fare. We did that. Nowhere did it address changing student behavior. And so I think it was really important that Dr. Mullins came to us and said, this needs to be our next step. This is unconscionable, that this is what I'm hearing at such a high-performing district across the board. So I'm going to stop there because that was a lot of data before I move into kind of next step and just see if anybody has any questions before I go into the next steps.
Do you have, I'm sure you have, could you get us the actual numbers? Because number 2 for kindergarten
I can.
out of school suspension sounds horrible, but if we only had 1 and other districts have 0, maybe it's not as horrible as it.
I will assure you we don't just have 1,
Yeah.
but I will get those actual numbers to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got a question. I know it's not going to affect the kindergarten stats, which are going to be number 2 either way. But we have talked before about the fact that Brevard handles our drug-related offenses differently from many, many other counties. Mm-hmm. So I'd be curious, I don't know how specific you can get, but if we were to do that differently, if we were to have the dream of, the movie, the film that you sent us,
the Recovery High School.
Yes.
Yeah.
What would this look like? Would we? How much farther down on the list would we be? Clearly, there's work to be done, no matter what. Because, like I said, our kindergarten students aren't being suspended because of drug possession.
Right.
But right, I hope.
I think I've looked at all the data that is not in our data.
Okay, good. But we also don't usually send them to alternative school, and I know that's been a problem that we send more for drug-related offenses than other school districts do. So I'd just be curious to see where would we fall if we did that a little differently.
Yeah, and one of the things that we're looking at, and I'll just be frank, we've been we've been slammed a little bit.
Yeah.
But we
No
want
rush on
to, we want to do a survey of the large and the extra large districts to see what they actually do consider an expellable offense compared to us, and kind of do that crosswalk. But we just haven't been able to get it done. And part of that is because as we were working on this, we started going down those paths, and we just kept finding ourselves in reactive mode, and that wasn't the charge. The charge was to be proactive, to get a handle on this, to figure out a way to fix it. So we kind of set that aside to focus on the proactive charge. So we found ourselves wrestling with a couple of questions. And before I get in the question, just for people who might be listening, I'm going to use three terms. I'm going to say Tier 1, I'm going to say Tier 2, and I'm going to say Tier 3. And just so that we're all on the same page with what those are, a Tier 1 means it's good for everybody. In academic circles, it might be the 90-minute reading block. Every kid gets the 90-minute reading block. In behavioral circles, it might be social emotional curriculum. Every kid should have access to social emotional curriculum. So when I start talking about Tier 2, Tier 2 means there are going to be small groups or pockets that need a little bit more. So we're going to have our kids in everybody in the 90-minute reading block, but there are going to be some kids that need a more intense intervention, and they might be pulled in small groups for that, right? So when we talk about behavior, we might be talking about kids that maybe need small group mediation, may need small group instruction in replacement behaviors. So that's what I mean by Tier 2, small groups. And Tier 3 is basically one-on-one, a student who really needs intensive academic instruction, or in the case of behavior, it might be intensive like mental health intervention. So just know that when I use those terms, that's what we're talking about. So we looked at a couple of questions, and we were very fortunate the year before to have visited every school. Our student support team went in and asked some of these questions, so we kind of knew some of the answers already. And the questions were, is every school in Brevard County implementing some kind of multi-tiered system of supports for behaviors? Do they have a Tier 1 support for all kids? Do they have a Tier 2 support for small groups of pockets of kids who may need extra intervention? And do they have a Tier 3 support for students who need one-on-one intensive intervention for behaviors? The answer is no. We have some schools that do an excellent job. We have some schools that have an amazing Tier 1 support system, but it's not consistent, it's not across the district, and it's not everywhere. The second question we asked is, in the classrooms, do all schools implement some focused Tier 1 behavior support in all of our classrooms? The answer is no there as well. Again, some schools, amazing jobs. Some classrooms, amazing jobs. And when I went through this with the principals, I said, please, in your head, and if you're listening out there, in your head, if you know you're one of those schools or one of those classrooms, please feel free to put my voice in your head saying, but I don't mean you. Because we know there are some pockets of amazing out there. Then we kind of turned the mirror around and looked at ourselves, and we said, has the district done everything they can to ensure that there's a unified understanding of what a behavior support program should be? Emphatically, we said no. Again, we have pockets where we have worked with schools, but we haven't done anything consistent across the district. By history, Brevard County has been a site-based managed district. So oftentimes all of those decisions we leave in our principals' hands, but in terms of consistent, that leaves us a little bit wanting in the consistent realm. And finally, have we as a district provided schools with the training, the coaching, the feedback, the support they need for a multi-tiered system of support for behavior? And the answer was no there as well. So what we did is we started as a team, and we probably met, I'm going to say 12 hours, putting up all of the behavior issues that we saw across the district, from psychologists to behavior analysts to classroom teachers to support specialists, to every behavior problem we saw in the district. And then we started categorizing them to see if we could at least narrow our focus to start building what then became our framework for our plan. We made sure to add this into our strategic plan. It's under Objective A3 and it's Strategy S1, develop and implement a multi-tiered framework to support social emotional learning, behavior, and mental health across the school community. So these were the big 4 broad categories that we divided our plan into. It narrowed down to positive classroom behaviors, social emotional learning, positive school culture, and mental health. And I will tell you, my younger sister is a business analyst, and whenever I do a PowerPoint, I always make sure to go over it with her. And the first thing she said is, you need an icon for each of those. So that's what the icon is. So if you lose track in the PowerPoint, you can go, oh, positive classroom practices, it was the teacher. So then under each of those categories, we started looking at research-based programs. And we were looking at all the support we could give a school, all the support we could give a classroom. What are the programs out there that we already know worked? And I think we ended up somewhere with about 24, 25 different programs. And we just started narrowing it down from there. Number one, the limited resources we have in personnel alone can't support that many programs across 80 schools. But number two, the schools themselves can't administer 25 different programs at one time. So we narrowed it down to 9. So just so that you know, you don't have to land on this slide for very long because I'm going to go through each of these 9 with you and tell you kind of what's going on in each of the realms and give a brief description of what they are. But what you should know is that we finished this framework, I want to say back in January, and we were working on a matrix. How many of these were already at each of our schools? And from the matrix, we were planning out 5 years of training. And I smile because it was an ambitious, we were going to train all 80 schools in all 9 of these programs in 5 years. It was beautiful on paper. We were rallying our resources, and then COVID happened. So, it went to the back burner very quickly. We all got into survival mode. And as we began creeping up onto 2020, 2021, it was not an initiative that we could just let go because we knew the data. And we knew we couldn't discipline ourselves to good behavior. And so what we did is we took a step back and we said, what is the smallest, limited, most controlled amount we can roll out to our schools and it be successful, and us to make forward progress on a district-wide behavior plan. So as I go through each of these segments, I'm going to stop and tell you exactly where we are implementing something in 2021, so you guys kind of get a feeling for it. And it really narrows down to 3 pieces. So we'll take you through them. So one of our first pieces is the positive classroom practices, and we have adopted CHAMPS, and its secondary sister discipline in the secondary classroom. And this really is all about giving teachers the tools to show the behavioral expectations of a lesson. So just like a teacher might put up, today we're learning this, and this is how you're going to demonstrate you've learned that to me, we also put up, and this is how we're going to work together with one another, this is how you're going to ask for help, this is the volume of language, the volume of voice you're going to use in this classroom. And for the most part, for most lessons, it's just a routine that's established. There are going to be some lessons that are more interactive and you need to do a different CHAMPS chart. But this really just gives teachers the structure and the boundaries to let students know their expectations. And when students who know what you expect from them are much more likely to comply with it. So where are we at with CHAMPS? In 2020, 2021, we have no whole school expectation. We do have several schools that are already CHAMPS schools. We're going to continue with our training in Blackboard. We have added training to it. We are training all of our interns. We are training all of our beginning teachers. And we are working with all of our teachers who are struggling in the area of classroom discipline. but we're not going to go all holds barred and do training in champs in 2021. The second area under positive classroom practices is conscious discipline. Conscious discipline is well known. In fact, every time I say it to somebody who teaches in that pre-K to 2 range, they say the same thing to me. Oh my gosh, I would love to have that in Brevard. It's just so expensive. Well, we got one-time use mental health dollars, and we had to tell them what we wanted to use it for. And because I knew what our discipline data was for our youngest group, and because Dr. Mullins had shared with me the anecdotal data that he got from our pre-K and kindergarten students, and because I have sat in enough meetings with my elementary leading and learning friends to hear that pre-K and kindergarten kids are just displaying some behaviors that are challenging and increasingly so, we wrote our plan to show that if students learn self-regulation at 4, at 5, at 6, they don't choose to turn to other more self-harming tools at 12 and 13 and 14. And so the state allowed us to use our one-time use mental health dollars to bring conscious discipline in. This is one of our initiatives that we're going to do across all elementary, and we have been working with them all summer long. They are creating online training for us. You know, our first goal was to get it all in person. We knew back in probably beginning of April that wasn't gonna work. Not only did we not want to pull teachers out of buildings, but I knew we didn't want them to get together in large groups of people. So I just want, this is about 5 minutes. This is the founder of Conscious Discipline. She's going to explain it far better than I can. So if we can just, and I just think a foundation of understanding is going to be good for everybody as we go into this initiative.
Welcome to Conscious Clips in our time together. Conscious Clips is a series of videos to introduce to you the skills and powers of conscious discipline. So, what is conscious discipline? Conscious discipline is an emotional intelligence program to help adults and children respond from the higher centers of their brain instead of react from the lower centers of their brain to conflict in life situations. So basically what it is, it's a shift from a very traditional, compliant, obedient model of discipline to one that's a relationship-based model of discipline. And each of these have different core beliefs. In the traditional model, the goal is to make children behave. It's based on the notion we can make children mind. We can make our spouse change. We can make coworkers be more productive. Now, I don't know about you, but I've lived long enough to know that you can't make anybody else change. You can't, and maybe you've tried. Maybe you've tried to have a smoker quit smoking, a drinker quit drinking, or an 8-month-old eat those peas. It's impossible to make others change. Now, the conscious discipline says, since that is impossible, what is possible? It's possible to change ourselves. And because we're in dynamic relationships with each other, if I change myself, and the dance we do with each other, then you, in turn, will change how you respond to me. The second difference between traditional discipline and conscious discipline is traditional discipline relies on rules and consequence as its foundation. And it says if it could just find the right rule or the right consequence, this behavior would go away. Now, if you go from jail cell to jail cell in America, you could ask almost everyone in jail, say, do you know the rule about killing? And they all could say yes. So obviously, rules and consequences aren't going to get perfect behavior because we're not short on rules. We'd all have a wonderful society. So conscious discipline says what governs behavior, what's the foundation, is a relationship with one another. And our relationship with each other gives us the willingness to want to solve our conflicts. And everybody knows this. Everyone's experienced this. When you feel close to someone, when your relationship is going well, and you say, well, could you get me something out of the fridge? They'll go, okay. But when your relationship is severed, when you're mad at them, when you haven't been talking for years, and you say, could you get me something out of the fridge? They'll go, get it yourself. So that relationship gives us the willingness, to solve our conflicts. So the third difference between traditional discipline and conscious discipline is in traditional discipline, we're trying to get rid of conflict. We don't like conflict. We grew up and conflict was a painful thing. It hurt. All of we knew that conflict represented hurtful things, screaming, yelling, days of intense silence. So when we grew up, we want to do anything to avoid conflict. And so what we've done to try to avoid conflict is usually rewards and punishment. If you have no conflict this morning, I give you a little gummy bear. Or we'll take you to McDonald's if you just straighten up and act right. Or if you do these things wrong, we're going to take away things. We're going to take away recess if you're a teacher. We're going to take away TV privileges if you're a child. So it's based on these external models, external reinforcers, external punishers governing your behavior. A stimulus response. Here's the stimulus, you respond differently. Conscious discipline views conflict very, very differently. And what it does is help you. It helps you perceive conflict differently. It helps you see conflict as missing social and emotional skills. And then it teaches you the skills of how to replace those skills in yourself and in your children so that you can build healthy relationships. And in those healthy relationships, you can have connection coexisting with conflict in a very healthy, growth-orientated way. So conscious discipline asked us to rely on internal resources. It teaches us to think through things. It teaches us to reflect on what's the best decision for us. It's not based on what stimulus is going to trigger a certain reaction from me. It says, let's think it through. Let's think what might be my best choice in this situation. So if you found these ideas I shared with you intriguing and you're ready to move further in shifting from a traditional discipline model to a more conscious discipline model, Conscious Clips will be a tool that will be helpful to you. Until next time, I wish you well.
So what they have done for us is they have created 6 two-hour webinars. And just so that you know, our expectation is that every pre-K through second grade teacher participate in these this 12 hours of training. The schools will be able to set up their schedule, how they want to set it up. We have a recommended schedule, but you know, that's not going to fit every culture. And I have been working with some principals already who have come to me and said, Chris, I want to do it this way or that way, and however it works for that school is fine. Conscious Discipline has also agreed to come in and do some intense training for any school that wants to be basically the gold standard schools. And so we asked our elementary schools, if you want additional training, it's required for all of your team. It's additional training for your administrative staff. It involves walkthroughs on your campus. Email us, and we'll make sure that we put you in the running. We were hoping we would get 3 or 4 schools that would want to be that gold standard. I had 12 requests. So the schools very, very much want Conscious Discipline in their sites. The other thing, because we went to webinar, originally our budget was set up for pre-K through 2, mostly because that's all we could afford to have trained. Now that we have it on webinar, any school that wants to do pre-K through 6 can actually do this across their whole school. Our expectation is pre-K through 2. Our standard is pre-K through 2. So I just want to stop and answer any questions that you guys might have about Conscious Discipline, because this is going to be implemented in 2020, 2021.
When you say, go ahead, Cheryl.
I was going to say, Chris, I don't have any questions, but I think it's a fabulous program. I'm really excited about it. Can't wait to see it in action.
Thank you.
So for it to be implemented this school year, then these training hours that you have listed on the slide, that's going to happen before August 11th.
No, it's not. No, it's not going to happen before August. Actually, the training model that's been recommended to us by Conscious Discipline is to do the 2 hours and then wait a month. Let it sink in, try some of the practices, and get together, collaborate, talk, and then do another 2 hours. So you're building understanding and knowledge throughout the year. Now, a couple of the principals I spoke to said, I want to do 3 in pre-planning and then build from there. That's their choice. We're waiting for them to be sent down to us because we actually don't have physical hold of them yet. And so as soon as that happens, I think principals are going to want to review them and set out their plan for the year. But no, the intention isn't to do like 12 hours straight through and then you're ready. It really should be something where they do 2, they do some practice, they have some conversation about how did it go for you, this is how it went for me, and then they add on to that. And of course, in the meantime, we're going to be working more intensely with the schools that we select as those gold standard schools. So as schools need more reinforcement or more coaching or mentoring, we're building that group as well. One of the things that was a non-negotiable for us is that we weren't going to do any training that we couldn't guarantee we could not guarantee that we couldn't. That's double negative in there someplace. We would guarantee that we would come in there and do some coaching and do walkthroughs because we didn't, what's the point of the one-shot training and walk away? So, so our goal is to do it right and to slow it down and to give teachers some opportunity to practice and get feedback.
Thank you for doing that, because I think we've heard from our teachers that the follow-up on the professional development in every area, not just this area, is so important, and that's sometimes what is lacking. I'm getting excited about this. As a former teacher, I'll say, yeah, it's one of the things, your classroom management and how to deal with all that is one of the things is the smallest. You spend so much time on pedagogy and everything, that's the smallest, and even if you're trained really well, it just doesn't prepare you for stepping into the classroom and having your own group and having this continued learning while you have your group of kids, and so that you can daily implement things and daily see the changes and the interactions. It makes such a difference, and I'm glad we're going to be able to support our schools in this way this year.
Thank you. I'll tell you, there's 2 frames of thought. One is that, if you're engaging, kids will behave. And the second frame of thought is if kids were behaving, I could be more engaging. And so, I've seen it work both ways. One of our directors over in Elementary Leading and Learning told a story about the most engaging teacher that she's ever seen, and the kids were not paying her the least little bit of attention. So I think you're right. I think we spend a lot of time on pedagogy, and it's important, but we got to have some tools in our toolbox as well.
Ms. McDougall, I think you indicated you had another question?
I do, and I don't know if Chris can share this information, but Chris, who are the schools that wanted to be, you're going to use as gold standard, and are they, if you can't answer the school's name, are they across the district?
I don't remember because they were coming at me fast and furious, and to be frank, I was sending them on to Melissa Braun, who's organizing this initiative for us. And so I don't, but I can get them for you. And they were across the district. They were Title I schools and non-Title I schools. So I can get that list to you. We haven't narrowed down the selection yet. I would love to work with all of them. I just don't know if financially we can do that. But we'll make sure it's across representation for our district.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Deskovich?
So I have a couple of questions / concerns. One, and maybe these are non-issues, but I just need a little clarity. Concerns I hear from employees and teachers in our schools is we have a program that works for us, and then the district makes us change.
Great question.
And so I want to know how this, especially, and now I see if we're only going to do this for pre-K through 2, potentially a school could be really doing a great job with a different program right now. Mm-hmm. And we're going to say part of your school, some of our schools you go in and whatever program they've adopted is everywhere. It's on every classroom. Mm-hmm. It's integrated on the hallways. It seems like it's really working and they've embraced it. And now you're going to take part of that school and give them a different program. So can you help me understand why that's a good idea?
Yeah, we had long conversations about that. There's 2 things. The programs that we picked all come together like this. So for example, in conscious discipline, you have circles. In PBIS, you have circles. In restorative practices, you have circles. It is all about getting your group together and having that and leading that conversation with them. So all of the programs we picked, they fit together like a puzzle. The second thing, and I had this conversation with the principals, is that what we're mandating is the training, because we don't know what we don't know. And if you have a school that doesn't have a risk ratio in the danger zone, if you are not suspending 12, 15, 18 kindergarten students a year, if you are not if you are not one of those schools that's contributing to the 7 out-of-school suspensions, then I don't want to fix what's not broken, but I'm going to give you more information. What you do with that information is on you. But we have two concerns there. Number one is something's broken. Our data shows us something's broken. And so if you have a school that maybe thinks that what they're doing is working and it's not, we need to be able to point that out. And the second thing is that, sometimes things are brought into school because it is what the principal is passionate about. And if that principal leaves and the next principal is not so passionate about, sometimes that falls away. And so we needed to pick a couple of very strong research-backed programs that no matter who the principal is, no matter what happens in that school, I have a team that can go in and support that implementation. So these are the programs that we're supporting. This is the program that we're training. It is not our expectation that you scrap what you're doing and use them, but it is our expectation that you look at your data to see if what you're doing is working. And if it's not, change needs to happen.
Okay, I think that's a solid, fair response. So my next question is, I liked what she said. I understand, especially for our youngest learners, I think it's important to try to fix the problem at the root before, punishment is put in. But what came to mind was me standing in one of our Title I schools this past year, and I just couldn't even believe what I was watching. It was, I think she was pre-K, I don't even think she was kindergarten, having a fit beyond fits, and literally 4 grown adults standing around her trying this approach, trying to say this to her. They had no control of the situation. And say they take all these classes and these 4 grown adults now can't be with their other classrooms because they're all surrounded in the hallway. Are they still allowed to go to traditional? Let me try to clarify that a little bit. Suspending kindergarten students sounds ridiculous, but in that situation, and it was a 10-minute glimpse that I had in. If that child was like that day after day after day and so disruptive to the school, is this tool of suspending kindergarten students still in play, or once we adopt this program, that's off the table and we're saying that can never happen again?
Yeah, we're not changing or taking away the discipline plan. The discipline plan is still there. We are not saying you can't, just like the big crisis when we put in the discipline plan is they're going to say we can't suspend kids anymore. That's never what we said, and we're not saying it now. Okay. I will say to you that when you have a student in crisis day in and day out, and that's a student in crisis, what you just described to me, and our reaction is the same day in, day out, we have failed. And so, again, we need to get tools in the hands of the people that need them. And once we can say, remember I talked about Tier 1, Tier 2? Once we can establish, yes, this school has a Tier 1 support system for kids, we can then talk about Tier 2. But what is ending up happening now, and the data I didn't share, is the overwhelming number of behavior referrals that we're getting to our behavior analysts and our behavior techs that all stem from Tier 1 problems. The expectations aren't in the classroom where they're needed or in the school as they're needed, and it brings itself up to the behavior analysts, and instead of working on the real Tier 2 problems, they're going in to solve Tier 1 issues. So we really need to get this foundation in place so that we actually have the resources to support that kid in crisis who's tantruming all day, every day, requiring the attention of 4 different adults on campus. I mean, as simply as I can put it, that's a kid in crisis.
Thank you. I appreciate the approach. I think I recently read a book someone gave me, and it was talking about how just as a system, we're constantly at the end of the problem putting Band-Aids, and it's costing us 3 times as much in people and money. If we would just go in at the beginning and set the stage, maybe we wouldn't be so expensive to put the Band-Aids on in the end. So I think that's what this is doing, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Moore, I just have, Mr. Susan, did you have questions for Ms. Moore on this portion?
You know, I might wait until the board meeting and just say something. I love what this is. It's amazing, and I think it's a step in the right direction. I truly do. Like being, in the classroom and seeing best practices, I do. But there's one piece that I think that we're missing, that I think that, I think it's one of the causes to each one of these kids that are coming into the schools, the why they're acting the way they are before they get there. And that has to deal with community involvement along with clubs and activities and opportunities for our kids to excel in something that makes them want to come to school. And it was something that I wanted to speak to about bringing in the community more often into our schools, and I was going to talk to that at the board meeting. But this is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moore.
Thank you, Ms. Moore, for the work that you're doing around this. I know, these are conversations that we've been having for some time, and I know it's been a significant area of frustration for a lot of our school-based leaders and teachers and staff at the school, because we know they all want to support their students to success. Couple of questions for you. I love that you are that you are rolling this out in a manner that allows you to go in and check for fidelity of implementation, because I feel like that's really, really important. That fidelity piece with all of the programs that you put up there, I feel like fidelity is the make or break on it. But realistically, your capacity to ensure fidelity is limited, just because you and your team are phenomenal, but we keep you very, very busy on lots of different things. Mm-hmm. So that makes me wonder, are we including principals, guidance counselors, lead teachers, resource, what is it, what are we putting in place to ensure that beyond the pre-K to 2 classroom teachers in a school, who else is going to be on the same page with us?
Yeah, each initiative is just a little bit different. We looked at the right roles to facilitate. We looked at maximizing our resources outside the school system. So, for example, part of their contract with Conscious Discipline is for them to send their people in, just because we knew we wouldn't have all of those resources. So we divided up all of these initiatives across our group. So like I said, this one is Melissa Braun is heading up this one, along with, she has a team working behind her, with her, I should say. And they are figuring out who the right people are to facilitate it, so that we are actually spreading out the responsibility. And as much as we can, and I will be frank, my team loves to train. They love to train. And when I say to them, no, pay for a trainer to come in, because I need you guys to do the walkthroughs and the coaching and so they begrudgingly, they want to do the walkthroughs and the coaching. They want to do it all. But they begrudgingly give up some of it because I just know the resources aren't there for us to do it all. And so in this particular case, we're paying facilitators to come in to do the facilitation and to help us with the walkthroughs.
Super. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I will do a quick check-in with you, Ms. Moore. The board meeting is scheduled to start at 9:30.
What time is it?
It is 9:20.
That ain't gonna work.
Okay. So I will just make an announcement now that we will be starting the board meeting slightly late this morning, so that we can finish up. Ms. Moore,
I'll go quick. I'll try to pick it up.
Well, this is really important, so I don't want to shortcut this conversation.
Okay.
Because I think this has the potential to have a significant impact on our district as a whole. So I don't want to shortcut you.
Okay.
But rough idea of how much longer you think you
I'm
need.
going to say 30 minutes.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Unless you guys ask 30 minutes of questions. Then it'll be
Which
longer.
we may.
I'll go through to the end, and then we'll save all questions for the end. So the last one under positive classroom practices is actually universal design for learning. This is the engagement piece. And this has actually been around a long time. It's been in state statute. It's been in the state reading plan. It's been in the district reading plan. But we really never embraced it in Brevard County. We offer individual trainings. And it's something that we know needs to be embraced across all of our classrooms. As we looked at what our plan was, again, next year we said no school-wide expectation, and in fact, Because it's been around so long and misunderstood so long, we decided we were going to take 2021 to build the foundation at the district level. All district leaders are going to participate in a book study, dive into UDL, or I guess I should say Student Services and Leading and Learning. As well as anybody else who wants to participate. We offered principals if they would like to dive into UDL with us, and we probably had, I think, 10 or 11 principals that want to do the book study with us. And as we go forward to 21, 22, we're going to build understanding into our principals. Some of you guys may have been around for UBD, which is a planning process. This is totally different, so I don't want you to confuse those two things. And what we're trying to do is not repeat some of our past mistakes and build a solid foundation of understanding in our leadership before we roll it out to our teachers. So that isn't even looked to be rolled out until 22, 23. So moving into the social emotional realm, we have decided on 2 curriculums. The first one is Sanford Harmony for pre-K through 6, and the second one is Lions Quest 7 through 12. As you guys know, many schools have great programs, and this goes right to Ms. Deskovich's question. We don't want to replace their programs. If they have a great SEL program and it's working for them, we are not asking them to replace it with Sanford Harmony. We are saying you have to have the Sanford Harmony training because it's a good companion training. There are going to be things in there that may not be in what you're currently doing, and you may want to bring it in. On the other hand, you may look at it and say, I'm going to shelve it, but you're at least going to know that tool is available to you. For 2021, we do have a August, September, October SEL plan as kids come back into school, and we are requiring 8 SEL lessons for elementary and 4 for secondary as they come back into school that all revolve around giving kids the opportunity to talk about the experiences that they had. And where we are in the world right now. And so, and giving them a foundation for understanding they're safe and we're here for them and we're going to take care of them. Because, the last they heard, they were leaving for vacation and then they never came back. And we were, in a lot of cases, the kids' most stable place. And even if we weren't that for them, we were at least part of their family. Parents will say we talk about the teacher more at the dinner table than we talk about anybody else in many cases. So those are the 2 curriculums we're adopting. What we're asking schools to do when they come back is to do a self-assessment. And we're doing this because we found a lot of schools were having difficulty finding time in their day for SEL. For our purposes, Jane Klein and Stephanie Sullivan, close your ears. It is just as important to find time for SEL in your day as it is for reading. And so we want every school to really do a self-assessment, reflect on how they're making time in their day, and to see if there's a way to fit in 30 minutes a week. That's what we're asking for, 30 minutes a week for SEL. And then, of course, we want them to follow the recovery plan for August and September and give their students an opportunity to process through their experiences these past 4 months. As we move out of SEL, we're moving into the positive school culture. It's not going to surprise you to see PBIS on there. For those of you guys who don't know positive behavior interventions and supports, it's a way to set up expectations school-wide, systems school-wide, give students a way to practice what the expectations are, and to know that they can meet that outcome every day. It is the tier 1 support that most, if you hear of a district that's doing phenomenally well across all behaviors, across behavior and all discipline, they are typically PBIS districts. We are not looking at adding any new PBIS schools in 2021 except we unfortunately have been cited by the state for disproportionate discipline in the area of in-school suspension, specifically with Black students and students with disabilities. And we have identified the target schools, and their answer has been to us, but our students are receiving services and they're staying in school. In-school suspension is still a removal from the regular school program, and it's still part of what the state monitors. And so when we went to each of those schools to look at what their tier 1 behavior system was, we found that there were gaps. And so we're going to be working with those 6 schools right out of the gate to add PBIS in as a Tier 1 support for them. We will continue to support the rest of our PBIS schools. Some of them want Tier 2 training, some of them want the booster. There's a booster class. We'll continue to support that, but our main focus from Jason Lobley and Renee Roth and that team is going to be CCEIS schools, and those 6 schools are all secondary.
I'm sorry, all the 6 schools are secondary schools?
That is correct. And I can't name them off the top of my head, but I can send them to you. Cheryl?
No, I was surprised
Okay.
that we have, but, and PBIS does work. It really does.
So also under positive school culture is the concept of restorative practices. Restorative practices fits in with PBIS. Restorative practices fits in with conscious discipline. Restorative practices is about looking at your behavior, owning your behavior, understanding and making a choice of how to resolve the issue with the person that you were in a conflict with. And we actually started this initiative last year. The way it was set up was we were going to have 2 days of training in the fall. We were going to give them time to practice. Then we were going to give 2 more trainings in the spring, and this is just with a leadership cohort at the 10 schools we were working with. And then we were going to have them write their implementation plan for 2020, 2021. We thought, oh, we could really get this going and give everybody an opportunity to train, practice, implement, walk through. That was our plan. Needless to say, the 2 days in spring didn't happen, so we are actually following up with those 10 schools right now. And we're going to complete last year's cycle this year before we add any new schools to restorative practices. We actually have a waiting list for restorative practices. Many schools want that training. We're trying to be really consistent and systematic about how we do these things. So we're going to finish up cohort 1, and we have actually already identified cohort 2, and they'll be put in place 21-22. In the next bucket was mental health, and this is the last of the 4 buckets. And that was, it shouldn't surprise you to have youth mental health first aid on there. We continue that initiative, and this year the state added an online course. Right now, I'll be frank, I don't know if we have the first online one scheduled. The last I heard, about 2 weeks ago, we were having some technical difficulties with that course. But it's going to be a way to get way more teachers through that course than the face-to-face that we currently offer. So that's going to continue to be an initiative. That's going to continue to be an initiative we're never going to be done, because every educator in the state of Florida has to have that, and we're just never going to be done, because once you are 3 years out, you have to have a 1-hour booster. And so we will continue with that. But the next one is the one I'm probably most excited about. We have partnered with Lifetime Counseling for a lot of things. They provide some of our mental health counseling in our schools. They contract social workers with us when we can't hire them ourselves. They contract, we pay for half of a social worker, and Medicaid reimbursement pays for the other half. So it's a great program for us. It's great for Lifetime Counseling. And we went to them and said, you know, we have a course on trauma-informed classes, but it has a limited seat count. And as our teachers come back in, we're going to need 2 things. We're going to, number 1, need to recognize that our kids are coming back from trauma. And I said this to Dr. Mullins and the rest of the cabinet, and I don't know if I've said it to you, but this is a crisis like no crisis we have been through in our lifetime, because this is called a no low point crisis. When we have a hurricane, we can watch it coming toward us. We can live through it for 24 to 48 hours, and we walk out, and it's at that point that we've hit our low point, because we look at our house, we assess the damage, we call our friends, we call the electric company, and we start making a plan. That's in our human nature. We're going to start fixing it, because now I have power back, because I'm fixing it. In a no low point crisis, we don't get that power back. We don't get to fix anything because we don't know where the bottom is. If you look at the research, there are two things that fall under no low point crises. One is a nuclear disaster, and the other is a pandemic, because the impact is far-reaching. So we wanted to make sure all of our teachers were trauma-informed as students came into school. But more importantly, we wanted to point out what compassion fatigue was. And compassion fatigue is just basically the cost of caring. It is the cost of day in and day out putting other people in front of yourself. And when I worked with the principals to go through this same presentation with them, I said, you know you're in compassion fatigue when you end up yelling about something or at somebody who really isn't the target of your anger, of getting frustrated over something that normally wouldn't frustrate you, at crying over something that normally wouldn't make you cry. It is because you have put everything out for other people and you have nothing left for yourself. And so we want to make sure that that foundation of trauma-informed and compassion fatigue are at least shared with our teachers in July, August, September. We want it done in those first couple of months. And the reason is, I'll get to the reason in a second. These are the six webinars. We've already trained our social workers and our school counselors. We probably have about 20 more that still need to be trained. They are facilitating, to your point, Ms. Belford, they're facilitating that webinar. So we took school-based people, we put them through three days of Train the Trainer so that they can go through these webinars that were created for us by Lifetime Counseling. We at first thought, oh, we'll train a core group and they can train 2 or 3 schools. After the very first training, I got a number of emails that said, that's not going to work because people are going to want to talk about their experiences and they're going to want to talk with family. And we're family. You strangers are not family. And so they really felt strongly that they could only train their school. So we put another training in place, and we were going to try to put another training in place for July as well. These are the 6 areas that we're going to talk about. And I just wanted to show you, this is a 2-minute clip of the impact that being in a trauma-informed school with people that are aware of their limitations and the behaviors that build them can do for a kid. So this is just really quick.
Resilience is the result of a highly interactive process between individual characteristics in the person and the environment in which that individual has developed.
It's really the counterbalancing difficult things that may exist in the child's life with positive things that occur within the family, but even positive things that may exist in the community.
An easy way of thinking about resilience is like a scale with a fulcrum in the middle of it. And there are things on both sides of that scale, experiences of both bad things or good things.
Our genes shape where the fulcrum is.
There are certain genes that make a child more sensitive to the effects of maltreatment or parental neglect or witnessing violence.
The fulcrum may start out kind of more towards one side or more towards the other side, and that's going to make a big how much these subsequent events affect things positively or negatively.
Science tells us that experience moves the fulcrum, for better or for worse.
Even though we are born with genes, genes will respond differently to certain environmental situations as opposed to others.
What the genes are actually doing are turning up or turning down the expression of chemicals in circuits in the brain and the entire body that govern our responses to stress, to anxiety, to depressive symptoms.
When positive experiences accumulate and children learn coping skills that help them to manage stress, the fulcrum can scale tilts toward positive outcomes more easily. That's what resilience is all about.
There's always an adult, or more than one adult, who is key to providing that relationship that helps to build resilience.
So we know our kids are coming to us, and that fulcrum is going to be shifted in a way that isn't going to give us a learning brain. It's going to give us a surviving brain. And so we need to make sure our teachers are ready for that, and our schools are ready for that. Because everybody has said to me, you know, I'm concerned kids have been out of school for 3 months, the behaviors that we're going to get back. And the behaviors are just a reaction to what is going on. Insecurity, anger, frustration, uncertainty, all of those are going to play into the behaviors that our students bring to us. So that's why we front-loaded conscious discipline, SEL, that SEL plan when they come back, those lessons, and then this the trauma-informed and compassion fatigue training. Again, that's 6 one-hour webinars. We want them all in July, August, September. Each school will have their own trainer. If they aren't able to send us a social worker or a school counselor, we have trained lifetime counselors to push out to them, as well as district-based social workers to push out to them. But the information that I've gotten is that schools are going to want their own facilitator. I went ahead and had, Kelly Soria is leading this initiative along with Lori Parsons over at Lifetime Counseling. Kelly set up a training yesterday and today for the principals. So they're getting all 6 hours yesterday morning and this morning. And we had, I want to say 78 either principals and or assistant principals on the training. And I received probably 3 or 4 emails from principals saying, I'm on vacation, but I'm going to log in. What do I need to do? So I think very strongly the message is getting out from our school counselors that this is important, and our school social workers, and our principals are going to be working with them on what the training plan is. Again, I can't one size this to fit everybody, so they're going to have to decide what the right thing for them is, but I needed the principals to see it themselves, to see its importance, and they did. They absolutely 100% did. We're going to try to do another one of those 3-hour and 3-hour trainings for any administrators that weren't able. I was going to invite you guys to the first one, but then I thought, oh, they're not going to have the background. So I waited, and if we have another one, I'll invite you if you're interested in participating. And finally, the last one under mental health is Sources of Strength. I think you guys all know Sources of Strength is a peer-to-peer suicide prevention program. We are going to complete all high school adult and student training. In fact, all of our high school adult training is done. We have 1 student group left. So we're going to do that in 2020, 2021, and we're going to evaluate all of the existing high school and middle school programs. You know, you put a program out there, and it may get off like gangbusters, and 2 years later, it has withered on the vine. So we're going to go out and evaluate those programs with the tools from Sources of Strength and provide support to those programs that need a little help. But we're also going to create an implementation plan for our middle schools, because our next step is to implement it at all middle schools. And you will be happy to know, I think you will be happy to know that right now Sources of Strength has a pilot program going on in elementary schools, not here in Brevard County, but across the country. So we're looking at that with interest. But our first goal is to get it implemented across all of the secondary settings. So again, this is the whole picture. You saw it at the beginning, so I hope it makes more sense now, kind of what we're doing. But I want you to know that this is actually the small picture in the bigger picture. Because it's just that first row, that Tier 1 support. Because we've been doing a lot of Tier 2 supports, and we will continue to do that, and we're going to do some training on that after we get a solid Tier 1 implemented. So I want you to know we do have a bigger picture in mind, but we're going to start with where it needs to start, and that's what's good for all kids. Okay, I did that in 15 minutes.
You did. That was excellent. Questions for Ms. Moore, board members?
I have a couple questions. What did Tier 1 look like before you put that chart together? this plan together?
What did Tier 1 look like before I put the chart together? Tier 1 looked different in every building, and some buildings didn't have any Tier 1. So their Tier 1 was reaction, discipline, behavior discipline. And if I said, and I mean, I've had some of these conversations, what are your school-wide behavior expectations? I've gotten some answers like, well, don't be late. That's not really a school-wide behavior expectation. That's a rule. And, you know, as you saw in the video, everybody knows the rules. It's what is it going to take to follow them. So some schools, on the other hand, have great Tier 1 supports, and many of them are the supports that are in that presentation. So what we're really looking at is what are we consistently doing across all schools that we can say, yeah, Tier 1 supports are in place in Brevard Public Schools. And so if the question is what are we consistently doing, the answer is nothing.
Oh, that's exactly what I was trying to point out, just the amount of work that you've put into you and your team and what you've done here. And I think we're going to see it's going to be very impactful for us as an organization. So just wanted to thank you for that. I do have, you kind of touched on it. I wrote down the question early on, or in this last little segment, the 30 minutes a week that you're expecting to be given to students.
For SEL, for social emotional learning, yeah.
Right. Schools that have social workers and a guidance counselor, I think they can pull off probably 30 minutes a week. My concern is most of my elementary schools don't have social workers at all. And then I'm also, how is that going to be implemented in secondary schools? I know like West Shore has power, they have the standard homeroom where they've been doing this for a long time and it's been very effective. Some of my schools have Power Hour and I imagine they can maybe implement it somehow in that time period. But who do you see, the guidance counselors are overwhelmed with scheduling and college applications and things of that nature. So who do you see in secondary making sure this is getting pushed in, and at what time, how are they going to implement that?
Yeah.
And in elementary, when there's no social worker and the guidance counselors knee deep and can't hit all 700 students, are teachers individually expected to push this in, et cetera?
So the first question, the first part of it is, I don't expect this to be a school counselor, social worker job. Could they do it? Yes. I view them more as the Tier 2. I view them more as the I'm pulling small group, because remember, Tier 1 is for everybody. So I view this in the teacher realm. So in elementary, when you talk about morning circle, I think many of you guys have seen Circle Time. That is where most of our teachers are doing social emotional learning. They do more than 30 minutes a week. They do it daily. There are some schools that haven't navigated that, so we need to work with them to figure out how to navigate it. But a morning circle is, I'm trying to remember which principal said it. We were going through this and I just finished the SEL and she got on the Skype and said, I went from having, and she double-digit number of referrals to having single-digit in a week instead of double-digit in a day when we started morning circles. So it just sets the tone for the day. Secondary is always going to be a challenge, always 100%, always going to be a challenge. And so that's part of what I said to my team. We don't go in and dictate. We have to understand the challenge each school is facing and then problem solve with them as partners. Because it's really easy for us to sit up here and go, well, you're going to do that, and this is the way it's going to look. But I've made the commitment to the principal that that's not where we're going. So we're going to start with the assessment. We're going to look at, what they already do, how they already spend their time, and then we're going to push in teams. Kathleen Erdman is our SEL resource teacher. We paid for her out of mental health allocation, and we'll continue to do so because she's going to start working with these secondary schools to go in and really understand their restrictions to problem solve and figure out how we can ensure that our secondary schools are providing SEL to our students. I don't have the answer for you because the answer could be, 16 different ways at 16 different schools. Okay. Especially because I know that going in, we're probably not going to start out with Power Hour first semester. In fact, I know we're not. So that's not an option that we can use.
Thank you.
Ms. Campbell, any questions or comments?
No, I'm good.
Mr. Susan?
So the success for this program, the metrics for it would be the original slide that we saw where our levels are comparative to the other districts to lower? Is that, so like asking, how do we know at the end of the day the success of this program and of its implementation?
Well, there are several metrics that we're looking at. One is just our overall suspension and out-of-school suspension and in-school suspension rate, our attendance rate as well, because when students get in trouble at school, they avoid school, point blank. We're also looking at our mental health referrals and the kind of mental health referrals that we're getting. There are absolutely a need for mental health referrals for mental health issues, but we're getting a lot that are discipline-based. We're also looking at our behavior analyst referrals. We'd like to see a decrease in Tier 1 issues coming to them so that they can focus on Tier 2 issues. We're also looking at disproportionality, because it's not going to surprise you to find out that the statistics I showed are disproportionately students with disabilities and African American students. And we have been working Tier 2 with a lot of schools that have had, not a lot of schools, with the schools that have had disproportionality warnings. And so we've worked with them and will continue to work with them, but we would like to see that disappear. So we have a lot of metrics, and it's going to be different for each group. So I know, I've mentioned some names. I don't think there's a single member in the student services department that doesn't own a piece of this, and then we still keep bringing in people. We've siphoned off some of Patricia Fontane's people, we've siphoned off some of Kim Bias's people, and we'll continue to do so, because the plan is, I feel it's kind of audacious, but I feel like it's the right plan.
So at the end of the day, there's a metric that says if we had 100 expulsions in kindergarten or whatever the number was, we're trying to reduce that by 10%, or are we just saying we're hoping to reduce that? That's all.
Yeah, we're hoping to reduce.
We're not setting metrics and saying,
I'm
hey,
not
we would-
setting, right
okay.
now, I'm not setting a percentage standard. First off, I think it's unfair to do that to a program that's being implemented across 5 years. I think you're going to see some ups and downs, but I want to see a downward trend across all of the behaviors. And I think it's unfair to do that when our original plan, we were forming cohorts of schools that were going through trainings together. So a school may have gone through Universal Design for Learning, but not have gone through conscious discipline in the original plan. And so we're really just looking at how can we implement this to show just a solid decrease in all of those numbers that cause us concern, especially as it revolves around disproportionality.
I appreciate you taking this on. It's a massive undertaking, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. McDougall, any questions or comments for Ms. Moore?
I don't have any questions, but I want to reiterate what Mr. Susan said. Thank you very much, Ms. Moore. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to this. We're on the right track, so thank you.
Thank you.
Ms.
Thank
Moore?
you to the ceiling.
I would echo Ms. McDougall's sentiments. I think this really is going to be game-changing for our teachers, for our staff members, for our students, obviously, where it's targeted. And I could not be more excited. So thank you to you and your team for all of the work that you're putting in. Please do invite us to any of those opportunities for the webinars, or feel free to loop us in on the book studies. Or I think, this has been an issue that has been passionate for all of us, I think. So by all means, put us to work.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. All right, if there are no further questions for Ms. Moore, I am going to adjourn this meeting, and we will convene the board meeting in approximately 5 minutes.